Hi everyone, and welcome to my next video tutorial where I'm going to teach you all how you can configure a Postgres database from AWS and connect it to your Django application. Right, so let's get started. Now there is a prerequisite for this video tutorial, so you need to ensure that you at least have an AWS account, and preferably you should have an IAM user account. Alright, so make sure you've got that all set and ready to go. If you're struggling on how to do that, I do have video tutorials on how to create an IAM user and everything. What I will do is I'll include that in the description below. Alright, so for those of you that have an AWS account and you're signed in as an IAM user, let's get started. Right, so the service that we want to make use of is known as RDS. Okay, so RDS stands for Relational Database Service. Okay, and this is basically a managed relational database service. So we can handle relational databases. If we want to make use of non-relational databases, we would use something known as DynamoDB. But in our case, we want to provision a Postgres database, so we're going to use RDS as our service. And what you can do is you can actually bookmark it here to your navigation bar if you prefer. I do prefer this sometimes, but it does get tedious if you feel the bar too much. But anyway, let's click on RDS. Okay, so it does take a while to load up, so let's just give it a moment for the page to refresh. And then we can get started. Great. All right, so as soon as the page is loaded up for you, you can just close this icon here. And you can see here we have DB instances 0 out of 40. So what we can do is we can click here on this link. Okay. And what we want to do is we want to create our database. So very simple so far. So we can say create database. Okay. And we just want to give it a moment. Okay. So we can choose a database creation method. So we can either use standard create or easy create. Alright, so we're just going to keep it as a default on standard create because there are a few settings that we need to configure for our Django application. Next, under the engine option, you can choose your database here. Now this tutorial is focused on Postgres, so we're going to choose Postgres here. Please make sure you don't choose Aurora, okay, because they are extremely expensive. So rather choose Postgres here. Okay, engine version here, you can decide your engine version. I prefer to use 13.4, that's just my preference. All right, now under templates here, so I have an account which is eligible for the free tier. So hopefully most of you have this as well. So you can choose free tier. Okay, and we can see that availability and durability, this section is off limits to us, which is fine. So we can scroll down. All right, so now under settings, so let's just close this here on the right. So under settings here, we need to name our database instance. Now the name here that is defined here will be the name of our database in AWS, not in Django. So this will just be known as database 1. You can change it if you want. This is what our database will be called in AWS. Next, you want to go ahead and select your user name here. Okay, so before I actually go in further detail here, I just want to explain a few things. So some of the settings here that we configure in AWS on RDS, we are going to configure in our Django application. So just to give you a bit of background here, so I have a simple Django application running. Now by default, all Django applications make use of the SQLite database by default. And you can see this usually when you create a fresh Django project and migrate your default migrations. You can see it on the left. So in this case, DB SQLite. But in our case, we want to make use of our Amazon RDS Postgres database. So to make it easier for you guys, what I've done is I've gone ahead and I've written out here or typed out the markup for you for a basic database sort of schema here. So as you can see here, I have the following parameters. So we're going to start off with databases equals open curly brace and then the default. So the default engine is going to be that of a Postgres database. Then we need a name, a user, a password, a host, and a port. Okay, so these are all the configuration settings that we need to add in place. So what I'd recommend you do, you guys are more than welcome to pause the video. Make sure you add in this configuration setting here, these configuration settings, should I rather say, and go ahead and comment it out, okay, just for now, because we haven't configured our database, we're just about to. But just very important, make sure that you go ahead and you type out this markup. What I can do also is I can pin this in the in the comments below. I'll pin it as well, so you can just literally copy and paste this markup for you in your own projects, and that will make it easier, I think. So you go ahead and just type this out. Make sure you comment it out, because we're not going to make use of it just yet. So very important, make sure you've got this in place, all right? So just go ahead and add in this markup for your Django application. Right, so once you've gone ahead and added up this markup for your database, what we need to do is we need to enable a Postgres engine adapter here. So you would need to head over to PyPI, and you want to install this package here, so psychopg2 binary. Now, usually I would use psychopg2 on its own, but there are a lot of configuration issues, especially in terms of those that are making use of Windows and Mac operating systems. So this one here I find as a decent compromise. So just to give you some more detail here, so psychopg2, this package is basically a Postgres database adapter, so it's going to allow our Django application to connect to a Postgres database, even if it is in AWS, Heroku, Render, anywhere. So what I want you guys to do is go ahead and install this package in your virtual environment. So I'm just going to open up my console. Okay, just give me a moment. So it will just take a second. All right, there's my console. Let me just turn this off. Great. And I want to install this package. So I'm going to copy that. Make sure you're in your virtual environment, and we can install that package. Okay, there we go, perfect, so it's been installed. Great. Now, if you want to verify that it's been installed, you can type in pip list, and this is going to show you a whole list of dependencies and packages, so you can just confirm that it has been indeed set up. All right, so this will allow us to actually go ahead and make use of the engine here, as you can see. So we will actually be able now to make use of a Postgres database in our Django application. All right, so make sure you've got that in place. Perfect, so once you've got that installed, we can hit continue with the process. So settings. So here we need to go to credential settings, and we need to choose a username. So this is going to be the name of our user for our database. So I'm just going to put in my name, so Arno, and your master username here, if you look at the schema right here, okay, will fall under your user right here. And mine will be Arno, of course. So that is going to be your name. So the master username here is essentially that username. Okay, perfect. So that's perfectly fine. Next thing that you need to do is you need to auto-generate a password, or you can go ahead and manually enter in a password. I'd recommend manually entering a password here. So I'm just going to enter in a random password. Okay, and you want to confirm it. All right, and then you can add that in here. So I'm just going to add some stars. So okay, so enter in your password here. Okay, very important that you do that. Perfect. And once you've done with that, let's carry on. Okay, so under instance configuration, we're going to make use of one of the smallest databases out there, known as the dbt3 micro instance, which is very small, and it won't be so expensive. All right, so under storage, we can just have a look at the default storage here. So we're using general purpose SSD. Our allocated storage is 200 gig here. We're going to enable auto scaling. So basically what happens here is if our storage limit is about to be reached, AWS RDS is going to automatically scale our storage and increase the limit for us. Okay, but you can leave everything as default here. Now the connectivity section is quite important. So what you want to do is scroll down, leave everything as default. And you want to look for this subsection here that's known as public access. So we want to go ahead and connect to our RDS database via public access. So we can just say yes. Great, so that's all you need to do there. Now you can scroll down here, leave everything as default. You don't really need to configure anything else. Now you want to click on additional configuration, and here is the database port for Postgres database. So this is going to be important because I'll reference it later. So 5432. So we have that in our database markup here. So under port, we can say 5432. Perfect. So the only thing that we're left with is the database name and the host name for our Postgres database. So let's carry on. Database authentication, we want to authenticate the database using database passwords. We can leave the default. Monitoring, you can just read through this. We don't need to go through it in detail. All right, you can also read through the additional configuration, and we can go to the section here, additional configuration. And here is where we're going to name our database. So here we can name our database. I'm going to call it demo_1. And I'm just going to so long put the database name in here, known as demo_1. Great, let's head on back. Right, we can leave everything as default. And that's perfectly fine. All right, so we can see here the estimated monthly cost, so you don't need to worry too much about this if you're on the free tier, so you don't need to worry about that. All right, so make sure you've configured everything, and just to recap here, so your engine should be based on a Postgres database engine here, so you can go ahead and type this in. This will allow us to connect to our Postgres database and make use of it in our Django application. Demo1 is the name of my database. Arno is the name of my username. Of course, enter in your password. The host name we will only be able to obtain once we've provisioned the database itself. And the port is under 5432, which is the default port for Postgres databases. All right, so make sure you've added all of this in, very important, and then we can move on to the next set of steps. All right, so once you've done that, now let's go ahead and create our database. Okay. All right, there we go. So our database is currently being provisioned, so we can close this info panel here on the left. And if we refresh here, we can now see it's being created. Now this does take a while. It takes about 10 to 15 minutes. So what I'll do is pause the video, and once it's been created, we can come back and we can carry on with the configuration process, because we need to then grab the host name to enter it in here. And we also need to configure our inbound security rules so that we can actually access this Postgres database from Django itself. All right, so let's just wait for this database to be created. So about 10 to 15 minutes should be about a good time estimate. All right. Hi everyone, and welcome back. So we can now see that our database is now available. So if you just refresh this tab here, you can now see the status of your database. And as long as it says available, you're good to go. Now, what may also happen is you may see a large drop down here of a notification message that says your database has been created. All right, so what you want to do now is you want to click on your database. So this is the name of our database, database1. So remember, this is what I mentioned earlier on, was the name of your database in AWS. So let's click on it. Okay. All right, and what you want to do is scroll down until you head to this section here known as connectivity and security. So what you want to do is you want to grab the endpoint here. So this is essentially our host name. So you can copy your endpoint, head over to your Django application, and here under host, you can go ahead and paste that in accordingly. All right, let's head on back. All right, so the next thing we need to do is we need to modify our security group. So our inbound rule. So the inbound rule security group for this database. So we can click on the security group here. Okay, so you can open that up. Okay, and we can see here we have the security group here that we can modify. So we can just click on the security group ID. Okay, and what you want to do is you want to now go ahead and scroll down, and you'll see here we have one inbound rule already here. So we can just go ahead and in this bar here, or this section, go to the right and say edit inbound rules. So once you're there, okay, what you can do is you're more than welcome to clear all your inbound rules here for now. You can do that. So I'm going to do that myself. And we need to create two rules. Okay, so essentially, let me explain. I did mention earlier, but I'll say it again. So with our inbound rules here, we want our Django application here to be able to connect to our application. So via the host name, we want our Django application to connect to our Postgres application successfully. And that's why we need to edit our inbound rules, because remember, a security group is basically like a firewall, which has networking rules, which regulate traffic in, which stands for inbound rules, and regulating traffic out, which stands for outbound rules. So inbound rules will be based on Django connecting to our Postgres database, so inbound. So what we can do now is we can say add rule, and we can choose custom TCP, or we can say all TCP. All right. Now this is a bit of a lazy way, so it's better to be concise and say custom TCP. And we want to choose the port range that we want to connect. Now remember, our database is on port 5432, so we can say, all right, I want my Django application to connect to a Postgres database, which is situated at port 5432. And we want to allow access from all IPv4 addresses designated by the following CIDR block. And we need to add another one, so custom TCP, and port range again, 5432. And we want to allow effectively access from all IPv6 addresses designated by the following CIDR group or block right here. Perfect. So make sure you go ahead and set that in accordingly. And once you're happy with that, you can just say save rules. All right, so we'll now have access to our Postgres database. So that is looking good as it should be. All right, perfect. So I just want to show you my application. So it's very simple. I just have a simple one here that says Amazon RDS database configuration here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to test if we've connected to our database. So what we can do here is just open up our terminal. Let's type clear and make sure that you go ahead and comment out your code here. So you can comment this out. Okay. Okay, and now you want to comment out that your SQLite database, or you can remove it if you wish. Okay, now just make sure you add in your password here because I'm obviously not going to show it. So make sure you've configured everything correctly here for your Amazon RDS Postgres database. And now you need to remove your SQLite database as well. So go ahead and remove that. I would recommend rather commenting it out, but we all have our preferences. So make sure you got everything in place, and once you have, we can go ahead and run our terminal. All right, so just go ahead and configure everything accordingly. All right. Right. So once you've configured everything in your database configuration settings on Django, we can get started. So what we want to do first of all is say Python manage.py run server. Okay, just run server for now. Okay. And automatically we can see if we scroll up, it says you have 18 unapplied migrations. All right, so this is a good sign because this indicates that our database files haven't been migrated to our current database itself. So what we can do now is we can make our migrations and migrate our database files to our Postgres database. So this is a good sign because by default here, if you have a normal Django application running, it's not going to show this, okay? It will only show this the first time with your SQLite database. So this is a good sign that we're connected to our new database. So you can stop the server and now say Python manage.py, make migrations. So usually you don't need to say this command, but it's good practice to ensure that you create your models correctly in Django development. But you actually only need to just say Python manage.py migrate to migrate your installed app's default database configuration files. All right, so we can see here it's migrating all of our files here accordingly, our database files. Now, the fact that it's taking a long time is also a good sign that we are connected to our database. So let's just wait for that. All right, perfect. All right, so just taking a moment, so this won't take too long. It depends, of course, on how big or how large your application is. So mine's very small, so it seems like it's almost done. It's just finishing up the last of the migrations here, it seems. And there we go. Perfect. Right. So what we can do now is create a super user just to test this out. So you can say Python manage.py, create super user. Okay, press enter. And I'm going to call my super user admin. Leave the email default, and I can add in a password. And perfect. Let's just type clear and let's run our server now. Okay, perfect. So let's go ahead and see if our admin user is actually functional and working. So we can head over to our application, refresh. All right, our application is live. Head over to admin. And you want to log in with your new admin user's credentials. So go ahead and enter in those credentials here. Right, so once you've entered in your credentials, go ahead and log in. All right, so just take a moment, and also the slow speed is also a good sign here that we connected to our application. Now, if you head over to users here, you'll notice that you'll only have one user, and generally speaking, I'm assuming you guys won't have such a small application as mine. So you'll see here that we have no users, we don't have any of those models that we have or anything like that, and we can see here that this is our fresh database being loaded up. All right, guys, so that's how you can go ahead and configure our Postgres database to communicate and run within our Django application. All right. So we can go ahead and log out now. Okay, so let's log out, head over to our default page. Perfect. All right, so what you can do is you can head over to your application and go to AWS. Now I'm just going to show you how you can just clean up your resources. So you can just head over to RDS, head on back, because you should be on the EC2 management console for now. So let's click on RDS. And if you want to delete your database, okay, what you can do is you can just scroll down to DB instances. So you can see you have one database currently running. Okay, great. And you can just click on the radio button here on the left under database 1. Head over to actions and you can scroll down and say delete. Okay, so you can say delete. All right, and you can remove these final snapshots and retain backups. Okay, and you can just say here delete me. Just be sure to acknowledge that you are not creating a snapshot and that you're not aiming to retain backups or anything of the sort. And then all you need to do here is you need to go ahead and say delete me. And once you're happy with everything, you can just go ahead and say delete. Okay, and you can see here it's deleting our database. Now, if you were to refresh here this panel and you look here on the right, we can see it's deleting. So rest assured, if you see this icon, it will be deleted. It does take a moment. So just be patient and wait for it to be deleted. All right, guys. So that's how you can go ahead and provision an RDS database within your Django application. All right. So that's it, guys. And as always, thank you for the support.